There's this rule, right? A rule that governs, well, literally everything around you. And I do mean everything.
Yeah, it's inescapable.
Right. Like if you look up at the night sky, the only reason entire galaxies stay in orbit,
Yeah.
the only reason they don't just, tear themselves apart or collapse into a black hole is because the inward pull of gravity is perfectly balanced against the outward push of momentum.
Exactly.
Or, I mean, bring it closer to home. Look at your own bloodstream.
Yep.
You are sitting there right now listening to this,
Yeah.
alive and breathing, solely because your blood pH sits in this impossibly narrow window.
Right. It's incredibly delicate.
Yeah, if it tips just a tiny fraction of a point in either direction,
Yeah.
you just don't survive. Look at any forest, any ecosystem. It thrives strictly because predators and prey stay in this constant kind of ruthless check with each other.
It's a foundational reality that we usually just take it completely for granted.
Yeah.
We look at balance as, I don't know, a luxury, or maybe this nice abstract concept for a weekend yoga retreat.
Right, like a buzzword.
Exactly. But it's not. Balance is the operating law of the universe.
Yes. And here is the part that gets skipped in almost every single conversation about productivity or self-improvement or just trying to get through your Tuesday without totally losing your mind.
Which is most of us, right?
Yeah. Exactly. That exact same universal law applies to you, and not metaphorically either. Literally, you as a human being, you're not just one single solid thing to manage. You are an ecosystem.
A very complex one.
Right. You are running 4 different energy systems simultaneously. You've got the physical, the emotional, the mental, and the spiritual. And the absolute ironclad rule of this ecosystem is that the moment one of those systems collapses, it does not stay contained.
No, it never does.
It drags the other 3 right down with it.
And that is exactly what we're dissecting today in this deep dive. We're pulling from this massive, really cross-disciplinary synthesis called the 4 human energies.
It's such a great text.
It really is an incredible piece of research because it doesn't just look at one field, It bridges cellular biology, neuroscience, behavioral psychology, and even elements of these ancient philosophical traditions to map out these 4 dimensions of human life.
So our mission today, for you listening, is to really break down this map. We're going to explore exactly how these 4 distinct energies function, how they kind of secretly dictate each other's success or failure, and most importantly, why your conscious attention is the only thing that can actually manage them.
Right.
We want you to stop thinking of your life as this singular, overwhelming to-do list and start looking at yourself as a high-performance engine that runs on 4 very different types of fuel.
And to really understand that engine, we have to start by understanding the physics of balance itself.
Okay, let's get into it.
Because as you mentioned with the galaxies and the ecosystems, balance is a requirement. But what people misunderstand is what balance actually looks like.
What do you mean by that?
Well, when you look at nature, a forest isn't healthy because nothing ever dies. It's healthy because death and growth are in this constant, active, honestly violent exchange. Nutrients are relentlessly cycling back into the soil. Predators are actively culling herds to prevent overgrazing, which in turn saves the vegetation.
So it's a very active process. It's not peaceful necessarily.
Not at all. Think about an economy, right?
Yeah.
A healthy economy doesn't function because supply is just infinite and everyone gets everything they want instantly.
That'd be nice, but yeah.
Right, but it functions because supply and demand are constantly pulling against each other. They're fighting, essentially, to find an equilibrium price where both the buyer and the seller can exist.
Right.
So balance, in every single one of these macro and microsystems, it's never the absence of opposing forces. It is the active, relentless management of those forces.
So if we apply this to the human body, like the micro level,
Yeah.
the research provides some staggering examples of this. Take water, for instance.
Oh, this is a great one.
Right. We are told our entire lives, stay hydrated, drink more water. Water is life. But if you look at the cellular biology, there's this condition called hyperhydration. If you take in too much water without balancing it with electrolytes, your cells can literally swell up and burst.
Yeah, your red blood cells can actually break down because the internal pressure just becomes way too high.
Which is terrifying.
Yeah.
And on the flip side, dehydration shuts down your organs.
Yeah.
So water is only life when it is perfectly balanced.
Or consider oxygen, which is, the very breath of life.
Yeah.
But there's this fascinating concept called the oxygen paradox.
Oh, yeah, explain that.
Well, we view oxygen as pure vitality, but chemically speaking, oxygen is incredibly volatile. It's a highly reactive element.
Right, because oxidation is literally the process of rusting.
Exactly. So an excess of oxygen in the body causes overoxidation. It creates free radicals, which are these unstable atoms that can damage
Huh.
cells, causing illness, aging, all of that.
Wow.
And on a macro scale, an excess of oxygen in the atmosphere would fuel these devastating, uncontrollable fires that could just wipe out entire ecosystems with a single spark.
But obviously deficit of oxygen,
Causes asphyxiation and death within minutes, yeah.
right?
So oxygen isn't inherently good or bad. It's this vital force that exists on an impossibly narrow tightrope.
I really want to pause on that tightrope visual because I think it changes everything about how we view our own lives.
Yeah.
We usually think of balance like a static painting hanging on a wall.
Hmm.
You put the nail in, you adjust the frame so it's perfectly straight, and then you just step back and walk away, and the painting just stays balanced.
Right, forever.
But based on what you're saying, true balance is actually more like a high-stakes plate spinning act.
Oh, absolutely.
The plates are always losing momentum, gravity's always pulling them down, and you have to constantly run back and forth, adding energy to keep them spinning.
That is a perfect analogy because the painting on the wall implies you can just achieve balance and then stop working. But the spinning plates represent reality balance, requires constant active input.
But here is the terrifying part for us as individuals. In nature, something is always actively managing those forces, right?
Yes.
Gravity holds the stars in place without the stars needing to. Like, think about it. The carbon cycle balances oxygen and carbon dioxide totally automatically. Predation manages the herds.
Right, it's baked into the system.
Exactly. But for you, as a human being navigating the modern world, there is no external gravity holding your internal ecosystem together.
No.
There's no automatic mechanism that forces you to put your phone down and go to sleep, or forces you to process your anger in a healthy way. That something doing the balancing has to be your own conscious attention.
Yes. Nobody manages your internal balance for you. If you don't step up and take the wheel, you don't just stay in a neutral state, you drift.
You drift.
Yeah, you drift out of alignment, and those opposing forces just start tearing the system apart.
And before you can really take the wheel, you have to understand the machinery you're working with. Which brings us to the very first of the four systems, physical energy.
The foundation.
We have this biological engine, this incredible sophisticated machine, and we basically operate it entirely in the dark.
We do. And it is the foundation of everything else. If the physical energy system fails, the emotional, mental, and spiritual systems, they simply do not have the biological resources to function.
So what is actually happening under the hood there?
Well, at the cellular level, your body is basically a relentless 24/47 manufacturing plant. It takes the food you eat and the oxygen you breathe, and it converts them into a usable energy molecule called ATP, or adenosine triphosphate.
Okay, let's break down ATP because this is one of those things that gets thrown around in high school biology and then immediately forgotten.
Right, exactly.
How does a molecule actually give me the energy to walk across the room?
Okay, think of ATP as a tightly coiled spring or maybe a fully charged battery. The molecule has 3 phosphate groups attached to it.
Okay.
And the bonds holding those phosphate groups together, particularly the very last one, they're incredibly unstable, and they store a massive amount of potential energy.
Got it.
So when your body needs to do work, whether that's firing a neuron, contracting a bicep, digesting your lunch, an enzyme comes in and literally breaks off that third phosphate group.
And snapping that chemical bond is what actually releases the energy.
Precisely. Snapping that bond releases this burst of usable chemical and thermal energy. And then the ATP becomes ADP adenosine diphosphate because it only has 2 phosphates left.
Right, so it's like an empty battery now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So your body sends that empty battery back to the mitochondria, which are your cellular power plants, uses the food you've eaten to attach a new third phosphate, and the battery is recharged. And this is happening billions of times a second inside you.
That is just wild. And the research outlines that we have 2 entirely different manufacturing processes
Yes.
for this, right? The aerobic and anaerobic systems.
Yes, and this goes right back to the concept of the active spinning plates. Your body has to constantly balance how it generates this ATP based on what you're actually demanding of it. So the aerobic system uses oxygen to produce ATP. It's highly efficient, but it's pretty slow. It's designed for sustained, lower intensity efforts.
So if you're going for a long walk.
Right, or casually riding a bike. Your aerobic system is just steadily churning out ATP to keep you moving.
But if, say, A dog starts chasing me on that walk. Slow and steady isn't really going to cut it.
Exactly. And that is when your body instantaneously shifts the balance to the anaerobic system.
Without oxygen.
Right. This system produces ATP without relying on oxygen. It is incredibly fast, explosive, and perfect for short bursts of massive intensity, like sprinting away from a threat or lifting a heavy weight.
There's a catch, right?
Yeah, the trade-off is that it's highly inefficient, and it creates byproducts, like lactic acid, that literally force you to stop and recover. Your body is just a master at toggling between these two systems, balancing the need for immediate survival against long-term endurance.
I really want to pull on a thread here because this is where the research gets absolutely fascinating to me.
Yeah.
We always hear this metaphor of the body as a furnace. You throw calories into the fire burns them, and you get energy.
Right, calories in, calories out.
Yeah, but viewing the body as just a furnace burning fuel feels way too simplistic, especially when we look at how this ATP is actually utilized. Because the energy we're generating isn't just chemical or mechanical. It is highly electrical.
It is deeply, fundamentally bioelectric. The human body is essentially an electrical grid. And to understand this, we have to look at the resting membrane potential.
Okay, let's unpack that. What exactly is a resting membrane potential?
So at a microscopic level, every single cell in your body is surrounded by a membrane.
Okay.
And there's a slight measurable difference in electrical charge between the inside of the cell and the fluid outside the cell. The inside is typically kept at a negative charge relative to the outside.
And that's on purpose.
Oh, absolutely. This isn't an accident. Your body spends a massive amount of its ATP specifically to maintain this electrical tension.
Why, though? What is the point of keeping the inside negative?
It's creating potential energy. Think of a hydroelectric dam holding back millions of gallons of water. The water desperately wants to flow down, but the dam holds it back, creating massive potential energy.
Okay, I can picture that.
Your cell membranes are the dam, and they manage this using ion channels, specifically sodium and potassium pumps. The cell pumps positively charge sodium ions outside and keeps potassium inside.
Right.
When a nerve cell, a neuron, needs to send a signal to your brain or to your muscle, it essentially opens the floodgates of the dam.
So all that sodium just rushes back in.
Positively charged sodium floods in, potassium rushes out, and this rapid, violent exchange of charged particles flips the electrical polarity of the cell in like a millisecond.
Wow.
That flipping creates an electrical spark called an action potential.
Yeah.
It is literally a wave of electricity firing down the length of the nerve.
And that spark does what exactly?
That single electrical wave is how your brain tells your lungs to expand. It's how your heart knows to beat. Without that bioelectric spark, you are completely inert.
So when we talk about physical energy, we aren't just talking about, digesting a bagel. We are talking about maintaining a highly sensitive bioelectric grid.
Exactly.
And what's wild to me is connecting this modern biochemistry to ancient wisdom, because the researchers draw this brilliant parallel.
Oh, it's so good.
Right. Long before humanity had electron microscopes to observe sodium and potassium ions, ancient traditions were mapping this exact same energetic reality.
It's such a profound connection because traditional Chinese medicine has operated for thousands of years on the premise of qi, this vital life force moving through specific pathways or meridians in the body. And when the qi is blocked, illness occurs.
Yeah.
Yogic traditions from India mapped out prana, breath, and life energy moving through energy centers called chakras.
And for a long time, Western science looked at those concepts and said, well, we can't find a physical qi organ in a dissection, so it must just be a myth.
Right, but when you understand the resting membrane potential and the bioelectric nature of the nervous system, you realize they were describing the exact same physiological truth using the vocabulary of their time.
That makes so much sense.
Whether you view qi and prana as literal electrical currents or profound metaphors, the ancient sages and modern neuroscientists are pointing at the same fundamental reality. The human body is not a furnace. It is a complex, energetic receiver and transmitter.
Okay, so we have this incredible machine. It's generating ATP, it's balancing aerobic and anaerobic demands, it's firing bioelectric signals. Let's go back to the car and driver metaphor we talked about.
Sure.
This physical system is the engine of the car. It is pure, raw horsepower. But without your conscious awareness, the driver actively steering, all that raw horsepower is completely blind.
Totally.
You can have a perfectly tuned physical engine, you can eat a perfect diet, run 10 miles a day, but if you aren't paying attention, the car is going to get hijacked.
Hijacked is the exact right word, because here is the real vulnerability in this system. A massive percentage of this brilliant bioelectric energy we just described is constantly being commandeered.
By what?
It gets overridden by our most primitive, rapid response survival mechanism. And that brings us to the second of the four systems, emotional energy.
And this is where I think most of us struggle the hardest.
Oh, without a doubt.
We have this tendency to think of emotions as abstract things.
Yeah.
We think of a feeling as just a mood floating around on the cloud of our minds.
Right.
But the synthesis we're discussing today makes it intensely biologically clear that emotions are not abstract. They are biochemical, physiological events happening in the physical tissue of your body.
Emotions are primal overrides. That's the best way to look at it. To understand emotional energy, you have to look past the conscious mind and look deep into the center of the brain at this tiny almond-shaped structure called the amygdala.
The psychological sentinel.
Exactly. The amygdala is your internal radar system. It is constantly, endlessly scanning every sight, sound, and smell in your environment, and it's asking one single repetitive question.
Which is
this a threat, or am I safe? If it decides the answer is no, that a threat is present, it initiates this massive physiological cascade that the psychologist Daniel Goleman famously termed the limbic hijack.
Limbic hijack. That perfectly explains why we can logically know that a situation isn't physically dangerous, like, say, getting called into the boss's office, but our hands are still shaking, our throat goes dry, and we just can't think straight.
Because your logical brain is quite literally locked out of the room.
Really?
Yeah, this is a matter of anatomical wiring. When sensory data enters your brain, say, your eye sees something moving in the tall grass, that visual signal goes to a routing station called the thalamus. The thalamus splits the signal. It sends one signal on the high road to the visual cortex and the neocortex. That is your rational thinking brain. The neocortex takes its time. It analyzes the shape, the color, and eventually concludes, oh, that is a green garden snake. It is completely harmless.
But the thalamus also sends a second signal, right?
Yes. It sends a second signal on the low road directly to the amygdala, and the low road is faster.
How much faster?
It arrives milliseconds before the rational brain gets the message. So before you can logically process the garden snake, the amygdala receives this messy, unrefined signal of slithering shape, sounds the alarm, and takes total control of the bioelectric grid.
It just takes over.
Completely. It dumps fight-or-flight hormones like adrenaline and cortisol into your bloodstream. It spikes your heart rate. It completely bypasses logic.
It's an evolutionary masterpiece, really. I mean, if you waited for the neocortex to logically deduce whether a tiger was hungry, you'd be eaten.
Exactly. The amygdala acts first and asks questions later. And the physiological mapping of this is just mind-blowing. It explains why different emotions actually feel different in our physical bodies.
Right, because it's redirecting resources.
The circulatory changes alone are fascinating. When the amygdala triggers anger, it doesn't just randomly increase your heart rate. It specifically surges blood flow to your hands and your upper body.
Wait, really?
Yeah, your biology is literally mechanically preparing you to grasp a weapon or strike an adversary.
That is wild. But when you feel fear, the map changes entirely.
Right. With fear, the amygdala shunts the blood away from your digestive tract and away from the surface of your skin and rushes it to your large skeletal muscles, particularly your legs.
Run.
It is preparing you to sprint for your life. And because the blood is literally draining away from your face and the surface of your skin, you physically experience a chilling sensation.
So that old saying, my blood ran cold,
is not poetry. It is a literal circulatory reality.
that is incredible. There are these two stories detailed in the research that highlight just how powerful this limbic hijack is, and they are unforgettable.
Let's really set the scene for the first one.
Okay.
So a person is sitting in a crowded house. They are watching a movie. The volume is up. People are talking. Suddenly, a fire breaks out. And it's not a small kitchen fire. It's an immediate, engulfing blaze. The air fills with thick, blinding smoke. The heat is instantaneous. There is total screaming panic as everyone scrambles for the single exit.
It is the ultimate amygdala trigger.
Completely. But the author writes that in a matter of seconds, amidst all this sensory chaos, they suddenly found themselves standing completely alone outside the main gate, a considerable distance from the burning house. They were completely unharmed, but they had absolutely zero memory of running through the house, fighting through the crowd, or opening the gate. They described it as feeling like an unknown, invisible power just lifted them up out of the living room and placed them safely on the street.
And the second story is equally visceral.
A massive, venomous snake slithers into a cramped classroom full of students. The author describes the event not as running away, but essentially flying out of the room.
Flying.
The physical body moved with such explosive speed and agility that it felt supernatural. In both of these cases, the neocortex, the conscious driver, never had a chance to form a single thought.
Right.
The amygdala hijacked the bioelectric grid, tapped directly into that anaerobic physical energy we discussed earlier, and just moved the body to safety.
It is incredible. But here is my major pushback for you on this.
Okay, let's hear it.
If the amygdala is that fast and that completely dominant, if it can completely bypass our logic to save us from a snake,
Yeah.
but it also causes us to overreact to, say, an annoying email from a coworker the exact same way we'd react to a predator, aren't we just prisoners of our biology?
That's a fair question.
Right. Because if the blood is literally rushing to my hands and my heart is beating at 120 beats per minute because someone cut me off in traffic, rational thought is completely offline. How does someone actually manage this energy in real time? It's so easy to say, just stay calm.
Yeah.
But the biology says otherwise.
That is the million-dollar question, and it is the exact reason why the concept of emotional intelligence, or EQ, was developed in the first place.
Okay.
You are not a prisoner, but you are dealing with a very reactive system. To manage it, you have to activate the brain's built-in off switch for the amygdala.
And what is the off switch?
It's the prefrontal cortex. This is the most highly evolved part of the human brain, located right behind your forehead. It is responsible for complex planning, executive function, and rational thought.
So how do they interact?
Well, if the amygdala is an impulsive, terrified child throwing a tantrum and hitting the panic button, the prefrontal cortex is the calm parent gently stepping into the room, evaluating a situation and saying, hold on, I see the email, I know you're upset, but we don't actually need to burn the house down over this.
Okay, so EQ is not just some soft skills seminar about being nice or understanding your feelings. It is the literal biological act of forcing your prefrontal cortex to dampen the electrical alarm bells of your amygdala.
Precisely. But as you pointed out, when your heart is at 120 BPM, that is incredibly hard to do. You cannot just think your way out of a limbic hijack because the thinking brain is suppressed.
Right.
You have to use physiological tools to bring the prefrontal cortex back online.
Like breathing.
Yes, deep diaphragmatic breathing is the most effective way to signal to the amygdala that the threat has passed. It mechanically stimulates the vagus nerve, which actually applies the brakes to the fight or flight response.
And what else?
Time is the other tool. The initial chemical dump of a limbic hijack lasts about 90 seconds. If you can physically pause, step away from the keyboard, walk out of the room for a minute and a half, the neocortex has time to catch up and regain control of the steering wheel.
This highlights the synergy of the energies perfectly. Emotional energy is raw intensity. If it is completely unregulated, if you lack that EQ and you're constantly experiencing limbic hijacks all day long, stressing over the commute, raging at the news, panicking over deadlines, you are flooding your body with cortisol and adrenaline nonstop.
Right.
You just completely drain your physical battery.
You do. And when the physical and emotional batteries are completely empty, there's absolutely nothing left for the third system. Which is deeply problematic because this next system happens to be the single biggest, most demanding consumer of energy in the human body.
Which bridges us perfectly to mental energy.
Yes.
We were talking about attention, concentration, memory, and complex problem solving. This is the domain of the brain, and the statistics on this are just staggering.
They really are. The human brain makes up roughly 2% of your total body weight, but it consumes roughly 20% of your body's total energy budget.
20%.
20% of all that ATP, all that oxygen, all that glucose is being hoovered up by this 3-pound organ inside your skull. It is an incredibly demanding engine.
So if you're emotionally hijacked and physically exhausted, your brain literally does not have the fuel to focus on a spreadsheet or listen to your spouse.
Exactly. And this is where we see the most profound, undeniable mind-body connection, specifically through a biological network called the HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis.
Okay, let's unpack the HPA axis. If I'm visualizing this, is it essentially like a building's fire alarm system?
A fire alarm system is the perfect analogy. The hypothalamus is the command center in your brain. When your mental energy spirals, when you are chronically overthinking, ruminating on past mistakes, or dreading a future event, your conscious mind is essentially telling the hypothalamus that there is a fire in the building.
Even if I'm just sitting safely on my couch thinking about my mortgage.
Even then, the brain doesn't easily distinguish between a physical tiger and a financial crisis, so the hypothalamus pulls the fire alarm.
And what does that do?
It sends a chemical signal to the pituitary gland, which is the relay station. The pituitary gland then sends a signal all the way down to your adrenal glands, which sit on top of your kidneys. The adrenal glands respond to the alarm by pumping out cortisol.
The notorious stress hormone.
Cortisol is incredibly helpful in short bursts. If you actually need to fight a fire, cortisol mobilizes glucose into your bloodstream so your muscles have instant fuel, and it suppresses non-essential functions like digestion or immune response so you can focus entirely on survival.
But what happens when the fire alarm gets stuck on? Because for most people today, the mental stress doesn't end. We worry at work, we worry at home, we worry before bed.
When the alarm is stuck on and you have chronic cortisol release, it becomes highly toxic. Because cortisol suppresses the immune system to prioritize immediate survival, chronic stress leaves you deeply vulnerable to illness. Because it mobilizes glucose and elevates blood pressure, chronic cortisol actively breaks down your cardiovascular health and damages your blood vessels. You can literally, biologically, think yourself into a physical illness by leaving the HPA axis engaged.
Wow. And this feels more relevant right now than at any point in human history because of the specific environment we've built for ourselves. The research we're looking at introduces this great concept called digital time.
Oh, yeah.
It describes how modern life is no longer tied to the rising and setting of the sun or the changing of the seasons. It is rushed, relentless, and carved up into bits and bytes.
It's an environment of constant low-level interruption.
Yes. Think about the typical Tuesday. We skim the surface of dozens, if not hundreds, of destinations every hour.
Right.
You're answering a work email, then a Slack message pops up, then you glance at a news notification on your phone, then you respond to a text from a friend, then you jump on a Zoom call. We are actively fracturing our mental focus into tiny, jagged shards. And the result of this digital time is a state the researchers perfectly describe as being wired up but melting down.
Wired up but melting down captures the tragedy of modern mental energy perfectly. When your attention is scattered across 100 digital inputs, your cognitive engine is constantly revving.
Yeah.
You are burning through that 20% energy budget, consuming massive amounts of glucose and oxygen, but you aren't actually gaining any traction. You are just spinning the tires in the mud.
It leads directly to brain fog.
Brain fog, burnout, decision fatigue, and a complete lack of mental clarity. You reach the end of the day feeling exhausted, but if someone asks what you accomplished, you can't point to a single meaningful thing.
Right.
Conversely, when you actively manage and balance your mental energy by doing one thing at a time, by setting boundaries on interruptions, your thought process becomes deep, focused, and truly productive.
I want to introduce a connection here that I think completely changes how we value mental energy. We live in a world right now where artificial intelligence is rapidly learning to calculate, automate, process data, and optimize almost any logical task you can imagine.
Yes.
If your only value in the workplace is taking data from column A and organizing it into column B, an algorithm can already do that faster and better than you can.
Pure, raw mental processing power is becoming a commodity.
Exactly. The ability to just crunch data is no longer special. So simply tuning our mental engine to process emails faster or to write standard reports more efficiently isn't enough anymore.
No, it's not.
If the pure logic and data processing parts of our brain can be outsourced to machines, what is left? What is the value of the human being?
That is the ultimate existential question of our era. If we are no longer needed to be biological calculators, what are we meant to be? And that directs us to the fourth and arguably the most profound energy system in this framework.
Which is
the system that no AI can replicate. Spiritual energy.
Now, I want to play devil's advocate for the listener here.
Yeah.
If you are a highly analytical person, if you tuned in today to learn how to prep for a high-stakes corporate meeting or just figure out how to stop feeling so burnt out by Friday afternoon, the phrase spiritual energy might sound a bit abstract. It might sound a little woo-woo or disconnected from the reality of paying bills. How do we ground this? Because the source material isn't strictly talking about organized religion here, is it?
Not at all. You can be deeply involved in an organized religion and have vibrant spiritual energy, but the text defines spiritual energy much more broadly.
Okay, how so?
It is the energy of connection, purpose, and meaning. It is the deep-seated sense that you belong and that your life is part of a narrative larger than your daily to-do list. And for the analytical listener who wants hard data, we can anchor this entirely in neuroscience.
Yes, let's bring in the science.
Yeah.
How does purpose affect the biological machine?
This synthesis introduces the work of Dr. Stephen Porges, specifically his groundbreaking concept of neuroception. Earlier, we talked about the amygdala and how it scans for threats, which can be a semi-conscious process.
Right.
Neuroception goes deeper. It is your autonomic nervous system's continuous, entirely subconscious spanning of the environment for cues of safety or danger. It is happening deep beneath your conscious awareness, 24 hours a day.
It's like a submarine sonar.
That is a brilliant way to put it.
The captain isn't actively pressing a button to look for the ocean floor. The sonar is just always running in the background. Bing! Bing! Is it safe? Is there a threat? My nervous system is constantly reading the room, analyzing tone of voice, facial expressions, environmental cues, without asking my permission.
Exactly. Now, what does this sonar have to do with spiritual energy? When you have a strong sense of purpose, when you feel deeply connected to a community, when you spend time in nature, when you are working toward a cause, you believe in those beliefs and connections signal profound, undeniable safety to your nervous system.
The sonar pings the environment and hears, "You belong here."
Yes, spiritual grounding tells your neuroception, you are safe. There is meaning here. You are supported. And here is the biological magic. When your nervous system receives that deep signal of safety, it actively shuts off the HPA axis we talked about earlier.
It turns off the fire alarm.
It stops the flood of cortisol.
Yeah.
It engages the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest and digest mode.
So spiritual energy isn't just a nice warm feeling in your chest. It is a biological imperative for healing.
Without the safety signaled by spiritual energy, the physical body cannot fully rest, repair, or thrive. The cells cannot prioritize long-term maintenance if they constantly think they are under threat.
That makes perfect sense. To bring back the car metaphor,
Yeah.
if you have a perfectly maintained physical car and it's full of emotional fuel and it has a powerful mental engine, none of that matters if you have absolutely no destination. Spiritual energy is the map. It is the ultimate why. It dictates where the driver is actually trying to steer this machine. If you don't know why you are driving, you just end up driving fast in circles until you run out of gas.
And the implications of this go far beyond just your individual health. The research delves into a fascinating concept called collective consciousness.
Okay, explain that.
Now, again, this can sound mystical, but we can ground it in behavioral science. The premise is that energy isn't just contained within the boundary of your skin. When an individual successfully balances their spiritual energy, finding that purpose and signaling deep safety to their own nervous system, it literally ripples outward to the people around them.
How so? Can we track that in a measurable way?
Think about mirror neurons and behavioral ripple effects. When you are operating from a place of deep spiritual and emotional balance, your neuroception is broadcasting safety. Your body language is relaxed, your tone of voice is regulated, you are less reactive to minor provocations. You become a stabilizing force. When you walk into a tense room, your regulated nervous system actually helps calm the nervous systems of the people around you.
Contagious energy.
Exactly, and scale that up. A society that is anchored in that kind of balance naturally leans towards social justice, deep empathy, and environmental sustainability. Because when you feel connected to the whole, you don't exploit the people around you, and you don't destroy the planet you live on. Your internal balance physically changes the external environment.
So let's pull all of this together. We have the physical car generating bioelectricity and ATP. We have the emotional fuel constantly threatening to hijack the system via the amygdala.
Right.
We have the mental engine burning massive amounts of energy and vulnerable to the HPA axis fire alarm. And we have the spiritual destination, providing the deep safety required to keep the system from burning out.
That's the whole ecosystem.
We've mapped it. Now, how do we actively drive it without crashing? Because the core thesis of this entire deep dive, the final piece of the puzzle, is synergy.
Synergy is the absolute integration of all four energies. It is where the rubber meets the road. And the defining rule of synergy is this. You cannot isolate these systems. You cannot treat them as separate silos.
Right. You can't just go to the gym to fix a spiritual problem.
Precisely. The moment one collapses, it drags the other three down. For example, you cannot permanently fix a physical problem, like chronic fatigue or severe insomnia, if you are entirely ignoring unresolved emotional trauma.
Makes sense.
You can take all the sleeping pills you want, but if the amygdala is constantly firing because of unaddressed emotional pain, the emotional drain will keep emptying the physical battery.
And on the flip side, you cannot fix mental fog, lack of focus, and a loss of spiritual meaning if you are physically exhausted, eating garbage, and living on 3 hours of sleep.
They are intimately biologically bound together.
To really make this concrete for the listener, let's walk through a typical Tuesday scenario and see how this synergy actually plays out in real life. Let's say your alarm goes off at 6:30 a.m. You hit snooze 3 times because you were doom scrolling until midnight.
So right away, you are starting the day in a physical energy deficit. The battery is low, and your cortisol is already elevated from the lack of sleep.
Right. You skip breakfast because you're running late, another physical hit. And you get into your car. You hit a massive traffic jam on the highway. Someone cuts you off aggressively.
Boom. Limbic hijack. The amygdala takes the wheel. Your heart rate spikes, blood rushes to your hands, you grip the steering wheel, and you flood your already exhausted system with adrenaline. Your emotional energy goes completely into the red.
You finally get to work, sit down at your desk at 9 a.m., and you have to write a complex strategic proposal for a 10 a.m. meeting.
And this is where the mental system fails. Your prefrontal cortex needs glucose and oxygen to focus on that proposal, but your physical system is depleted. And your emotional system just spent all your available ATP fighting an imaginary tiger on the highway.
The HPA axis is blaring the fire alarm.
Exactly. You stare at the screen, but you can't string a sentence together. Brain fog sets in.
So you bomb the meeting, you feel terrible, and by 3 p.m. you are sitting at your desk staring at the wall, feeling a wave of existential dread, thinking, is this it? Is this all my life is? What is the point of this job?
Which is the collapse of the spiritual system. The lack of purpose removes the safety signal, which keeps the stress hormones flowing, guaranteeing you won't sleep well that night either. It is a perfect cascading failure of all 4 systems.
It's terrifying because it is so incredibly common that Tuesday is the default state for millions of people. So how do we interrupt that cycle? How do we actively manage the spinning plates? The research highlights 2 essential moral virtues for the modern age to help us do this: self-restraint and compassion.
Let's start with self-restraint, because it is wildly misunderstood. People often think of it as repression or denying yourself pleasure, but in this framework, self-restraint is simply the ability to pause. It is the EQ we talked about earlier, using your prefrontal cortex to stop the limbic hijack.
It's the gap between stimulus and response.
Exactly. Self-restraint is the discipline to not send that furious email when your blood is boiling. It's the discipline to not consume highly processed garbage food when you're stressed, knowing it will crash your physical energy later.
Right.
It's the ability to put the phone in another room at 10 p.m. Self-restraint is honoring your own biological limits and setting energetic boundaries.
And compassion is the outward application of that balance. It is empathy in action. It's understanding that the coworker who sent that annoying email might be experiencing their own limbic hijack and responding with care rather than retaliation, which in turn feeds your own spiritual energy and sense of connection.
And practicing this requires actual profound self-care. And I don't mean the commercialized version of self-care. It isn't just taking a bubble bath or buying an expensive candle.
Right. A bubble bath doesn't fix a broken HPA axis.
Real self-care is actively setting boundaries and honoring the natural ebb and flow of your capacities. It's knowing when your physical system is primed to sprint and when it desperately needs to rest. It's actively managing the plates.
Give me an example.
Let's look at a real-world example of what this balanced synergy looks like in practice outside of the terrible Tuesday scenario. Imagine you experience a massive career success. You get the promotion you've been working 5 years for.
A huge positive event.
Yes. Imbalanced energy in this scenario might look like unchecked euphoria. You let your ego inflate, you lose your grounding, you go out and party for 3 days straight, completely draining your physical battery, and then you immediately start obsessing over the next promotion.
The mental engine just keeps revving, never satisfied.
Exactly. But balance management means celebrating that success with deep gratitude. You allow yourself to fully feel the joy, which feeds your emotional energy, but you remain grounded. You recognize the team and the mentors that helped you get there, which feeds your spiritual connection. You accept the win, and then you get a good night's sleep.
Let's consider the opposite, because this is where the wheels usually fall off for people.
Yep.
Facing a severe setback, a failure, or a profound loss.
This is the ultimate test of the system. Imbalanced energy during a failure usually means suppressing the sadness. You try to power through it, which just lets the amygdala hijack you into a state of chronic anxiety. Or you let the mind spiral, allowing the HPA axis to flood you with cortisol until you fall into long-term despair.
So how does a balanced person handle a devastating failure?
Balanced management means you acknowledge the negative emotions. You let yourself feel the grief, the anger, or the frustration. You don't pretend it doesn't hurt.
You feel it.
But use your self-restraint and your mental energy to reframe the setback. You don't let it become your entire identity. And you lean heavily on your spiritual energy, your connections, your broader purpose to remind your nervous system that your worth as a human being isn't defined by this single failure. You process the heavy energy rather than letting it rot in your system.
I want to summarize this for you, the listener, because this is the single most critical takeaway of this entire deep dive. Nobody is coming to manage your internal balance for you. There is no external mechanism, no cosmic clockwork, no perfectly designed app that is going to magically align your physical health, your emotional stability, your mental focus, and your spiritual purpose.
It is entirely on you.
If you don't take the wheel, you will spend years quietly drifting out of balance. And the terrifying thing about the human body is how resilient it is in the short term. It will compensate for your bad habits for a long time. The imbalance stays quiet right up until it isn't until a major health crisis, a massive burnout, or a mental breakdown forces the issue and the whole car crashes.
Which brings us back to where we started. Balance is the daily, conscious management of opposing forces. Human existence is not one-dimensional. You are a complex, interactive ecosystem. Balance is not a destination you reach, check off your to-do list, and forget about like a painting on a wall. It is an active, ongoing daily practice.
We have covered a massive amount of ground today. We zoomed out to the macro laws of the universe, looking at gravity and ecosystems. We've zoomed in to the microbioelectricity of your cells, looking at ATP and sodium-potassium pumps.
We covered it all.
We've seen how your physical energy provides the raw horsepower. We've seen how your emotional energy via the amygdala can hijack the system in a millisecond. We've seen how your mental energy directs your focus and manages the fire alarms of the HPA axis. And we've seen how your spiritual energy provides the ultimate meaning and the profound safety that your body literally craves to survive.
It's a complete paradigm shift in how we view ourselves. And I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, one that bridges everything we've talked about today.
Let's hear it.
We have established through the hard science of bioelectricity, through Dr. Porges's research on neuroception, and through the behavioral realities of mirror neurons, that you are not a closed system. You are quite literally broadcasting your internal state of energy out into the world at all times. Your nervous system is constantly communicating with the nervous systems of every single person you interact with.
Very transmitter.
Exactly. So if the entire universe relies on a delicate spinning balance to prevent absolute chaos from the orbit of planets to the ecosystems of the Earth, and you are intimately biologically connected to that exact same universe, what happens to the world around you if you personally decide to step into perfect balance today?
That is a staggering thought.
Does your internal healing actually have the gravity to shift the collective consciousness? If balance is the operating law of the universe, doing the hard work to align your own four energies might just be the most powerful, world-altering thing you can possibly do.
Think about that spinning plate act. Think about the gravity holding the galaxies in orbit and the blood pH keeping you alive. The machinery is all there. The engine is running. The map is in the glove box. The only question left is, are you ready to wake up and take the wheel?